Hello, hello. Today on the podcast, it is February. February is Heart Health Month, and we've been talking a lot about heart health in our patient education that we've been doing, and Valentine's is coming up. So today we're going to talk about relationships and their impact on your overall health.
Right. Overall health and well-being. So it's certainly interesting how a lot of the different types of relationships out there that we'll speak of all come back to the same thing, is that they're all part of just overall being healthy. And so I hope that we can kind of shed a little light on that today.
You had some statistics that you wanted to
share. I thought it was kind of interesting. Doing some of this research kind of gives a little bit of light on how important some of the importance of healthy relationships are. So, it talked about various different types of risk factors. So yes, having according to a report from the Heart Foundation, it said that loneliness and social isolation are as damaging to your heart health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That is just incredible. I had no idea that was like that, but they do the statistics on this stuff and look at the overall risk factors that are associated with this. But this loneliness and social isolation, you could have approximately a 30% increase in your risk of heart disease and stroke, which is kind of incredible. And even, affects, depression and anxiety. So our mood, mental health are affected by it. So it talks about how rates essentially double in divorced or separated partners, which is kind of interesting too. But, you have a 15% increase in depression and anxiety in adolescents that have poor parent-child relationships. So you can see that the interaction between parents and children and partners, how that affects our overall health and
our community, those around us.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think that certainly, the types of relationship are many. So I feel like we can kind of go over the different types. There's so many different types of relationships that are out there, and it's in the world, if you will, to that extent. So we have relationships with our family, our friends. There's professional relationships at work, which is something that, a lot of us, that's our waking hours, is the individuals that we're working with throughout the day. And so a good relationship at work, whether you have good coworkers or bad, or, you just don't have good, solid communication skills, that makes a difference. Community and even, romantic relationships, with your partners, but even pet relationships. And Tandi brought up one thing that was kind of important, that, the relationship also with self.
Yes. And I think that's one thing that often gets overlooked. Your relationship with yourself is probably the most important, because if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, and it's going to be hard to build those relationships with other people too. And often, especially around this time of Valentine's, where so much is geared towards romantic relationships and relationships with other people, relationship with self is just as important.
Yeah. It's like a pyramid. Basically, it's like a pyramid. If you don't have a good foundation, the other relationships you have may not be as stable and strong. So I think that kind of is something that is maybe a good place for people to start.
Yes.
Is looking at themselves.
And I do think one thing to note, and we hear this all the time, but relationships take work. Every type of relationship takes work. They all have different seasons, and some seasons are a lot easier than others, but every relationship that you have takes work. And that's even parent-child relationship, even more so.
Yeah, I mean, we all put a lot of emphasis on, our work environment, and home environments, but we need to put work into our own relationships with ourselves and others. So it's just as equally as important. But some of these social connections, the healthy social connections that we have, will just really maintain emotional stability and overall mental health clarity, and really help with your generalized physical wellness too. As you can tell from the statistics, that we've mentioned at the beginning, that a lot of people don't realize how important some of these these strong relationships are with their overall general health and wellness.
Yeah, and I just recently read Mel Robbins' book, The Let Them Theory, which is a fantastic book for a lot of different reasons, but she has a section in there about friendships in adulthood.
Yeah.
And, when you're kids, you've got your classmates and you're in school and you're with the people. She had a statistic in there that said, in order to build a good relationship with someone, you have to spend like 200 hours with them.
Well,
So how important it is to, put the time and effort into building those friendships, especially as an adult when it's so much harder to prioritize and make that happen.
a lot of priorities out there these days, but yeah, building those relationships and not necessarily building, but also just maintaining is important for the strength of relationships. So, but good relationships, you're going to start with, basically reducing, your stress level. We need to reduce our stress just to help improve our quality of mental clarity. Also, good, healthy relationships are even going to improve our immune system and overall longevity. So that's certainly something that plays into that for people. But we have these 5 different types of love languages that you are very familiar with, more so than I am. So you may want to talk about those.
So I believe Gary Chapman, I think, is the writer of the book about the 5 love languages. And this is important in any relationship that you have, to know how the other person receives love best, or what feels best. And the 5 are acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, and physical touch.
Yeah, and that is actually, it's so ironic that we're speaking about this today, and this was not a topic of totally off subject, but that was something that was brought up this week during my surgical time at the surgery center, where we're asking me what my love language was in the middle of the day. It was just so off task, but it was so random. But yet it's like, okay, interesting. And then now it's coming back up again as we're talking about this. So it's certainly something that, I may have to look into this a little bit.
Yes, they do have a test. And
I can't.
I believe we've tested before.
Yeah, we may have tested and I may have forgotten, but and you're sitting here saying, okay, maybe 1 or 2 things of love language that's yours. What if I got 4? I don't.
He likes it all.
So kind of like a janitor of love language, I guess. I kind of do it all. So
Well, I do know that mine are physical touch and words of affirmation. Those are my love languages. Yeah, so yeah.
I have to remember that. So, but yeah, though, but that book, the Let Them book by Mel Robbins, I haven't actually got to read that yet, but kind of looking forward to that. I think it's a kind of a pretty quick read, actually.
Yes, and I actually listened to it, and it's a great listen because Mel reads it herself. So it's just like
sometimes those are kind of good to listen to on car rides or on long flights, so it's kind of handy.
Yes.
But we need to really work on those professional networks at work. That's certainly something that kind of builds good, healthy relationships. It's something you don't think about because, like I mentioned at the initial part of this, that we spend a lot of time at work, and we tend to work around those individuals. We have common goals at work, and it's so nice to be able to have those relationships that make us more productive during work too. And then you go home at the end of the day, you're not just exhausted, so to speak. So it's maybe a better situation. And then of course it's a lot nicer. It's like, okay, here Monday's coming around, I got to go back to work. So it helps to bring you back to go to work. Then that you're going to have an enjoyable relationship. And I can honestly say I've got a great work relationship with people I work with, both in our practice as well as in the other practice and at work. So, but that does help. It makes a big difference.
Yes, I guess that is an interesting thing to touch on too, is that we have worked together. We actually met working together
In the work relationship.
and
Yeah.
then
it was a medical mission trip. We may want to just bring that up. That was an earlier podcast, a long time ago. But yes, so we met in a medical mission trip over in Uganda. And so good, healthy relationships sometimes can blossom into other relationships.
Yes. Pets is another thing that's a great relationship. And
Right. Doesn't matter what kind of pet you have, you know, pick your favorite pet, whether it's a bird or a snake or a dog or a cat, you know. But it's certainly something where they are stressed. Sometimes they can be very stressful, but they're also stress relievers. I mean, it is a good oxytocin releasing thing to have a pet that you can actually have communication with and touch.
yes. And we are pretty strong believers in pets, and all of our children have pets. And so we think pets are a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. We all have that emotional tie there. But, you know, that the engaging in community too, community relationships, you know, reaching out to fulfill your sense of purpose or belonging to, or just fulfillment. It fulfills you to provide those types of services sometimes, or have that community support that, you know, you're doing something that matters in other people's lives. That does help quite a bit too. So it's good to have that community relationship.
Which is, I guess, another thing that I'll just plug in here. We're a little bit all over the place this week, but we're podcasting today from our new location, that UD Village. And it's a great little community here. We've got lots of things going on. There's a coffee shop, there's, you know, spiritual element, there's a golf course, there's
you.
yeah.
We're on a 5th floor, so we got an awesome one. There's a views all over the place. Can't wait till spring comes so we can actually see everything blooming. But yeah, the true yes, the environment, the community with which you work or, you know, live can make a big difference too in your health quality of health. So, but you know, what can we do to build stronger connections, relationships? There are a few things that we're interested in.
Yeah, I think some of the little fun fact things, and I think we've even posted about the 6-second kiss before from the Gottman Institute. They have great information about relationships in general. So good resource to check out. But 6-second kiss or a 20-second hug releases oxytocin. So
We're not talking just a pick on the cheek or it's like, have a good day. You know, it's 6 seconds and 20 seconds. That does show, and there are studies to show that there is oxytocin release. And oxytocin is the happy, feel good, well, not essentially.
Yeah.
So that does make a difference.
And then the 8-4-8-12 hug rule. So we need 4 hugs a day to survive, 8 hugs a day to maintain, and 12 hugs a day to grow, which is a lot. As we were kind of talking about this, you said you didn't think you got 12 hugs
It's like,
a day.
do I get that many hugs a day? I think about that. Okay, yeah, I think I do. So
But
maybe we need to start keeping a tally of that or something. But
yeah, but just something simple to think about, and not just with your partner, but with your kiddos too.
right.
With your pets, you know, and friends. You know, every hug you give is a step to getting someone to their hug-o-meter.
Yeah. And that relationship with our kiddos, our children, I mean, that's also very important. That's as important as any other relationship, obviously, we can have, even with a partner. So that's very important for them, because you're teaching them the importance and the values of building a quality relationship and keeping that front and center, which was going to make them healthy and their overall general health in general.
Very true. So back to building strong relationships. One thing that we do, and I think you can do this in a romantic relationship or a friend relationship or whatever relationship that you're wanting to grow, is plan some consistent time. So we do date night. We try to do that pretty regularly, at least every other week, where we get dressed up and go do something fun. One year we tried a weekly something new date night. So tried to do something new and different.
Yeah, and we did that too. You know, it's where the one individual's the only one knows what's going on, and the other one has no idea. It's just show up. Here's the clothing you gotta wear, and get in the car. And it's kind of fun, you know. It's exciting. It's kind of like, okay, now where are we going tonight? So
Yeah.
kind of a neat little thing to do. It's a little twist. But yeah, those something new. Events are nice. But yeah, so you know, basically to have a good relationship, you kind of have to have one with yourself first. So you gotta start one to get one, and you know, to improve those relationships, it needs to be priority. It needs to be priority for folks. And you know, one way that we can also improve it is to have good quality communication between, you know, individuals as well as yourself, but you know, have goals in mind. You know what your goals in life are, and you know, understand what your partners or significant others goals are too.
Yeah. I think the let them theory also has a lot of information about how to have good communication and how to manage relationships in general. It's a great read. Read plug that.
Yeah, right. And then, you know, of course, learn your love languages, especially if you're a significant other, so that you kind of know what they like, what they don't like. So
Yeah, stay tuned to hear what Dr. Mark's test says.
yeah, we'll learn that. But you know, we've also had folks that we've had patients that you know ask a lot of questions too, of course. So, but things that you can do to kind of improve your relationship quality. And, you know, there's things that we can do to measure those back up. So we can actually do certain labs. We can monitor your labs. We can monitor, you know, things you can do is to help improve sleep. You know, improve sleep will help a relationship. You know, you can actually even look at your vital signs, you know, your heart rate or your blood pressure sometimes, though those sometimes are indicators to kind of gauge how much where your relationships could be potentially. So.
That's good.
But what the hormone optimization things that we can do to improve our quality of our relationships too sometimes, there's nutrition, there's activity, better sleep, better communications we spoke about, and just, you know, hormone optimization sometimes can also improve some of our relationship qualities sometimes. And then, well, also individuals, what about counseling? You know, counseling is another thing, whether we do it individually or in group. But group therapy or individual therapy is going to be helpful for individuals to start to open up and learn how to break down those communication barriers.
I'm a big fan of therapy. I've been in therapy myself for many, many years now, and definitely advocate for therapy. And it's not always easy to find a good therapist. So just remember, it's totally fine to try out different relationships with therapists or counselors. And, you know, sometimes you can start, you know, couples therapy or family therapy and move on to having therapy by yourself. So
Right.
you can get lots of benefit from any variety.
Because there's some things that you may not say out loud, but yet that therapist can bring out so that, you know, your spouse, significant other can hear and understand. It's like, okay, well, that's what you think might mention this. So, you know, those types of things is helpful for therapy.
Yeah, peace out.
Well, I hope that everybody's gotten a little information today about how you can improve relationships. As you can tell, there's multiple types of relationships, multiple ways of improving that. But hopefully you can take away one or two things and do something to improve your own relationship with your group. So
Your crew. Yeah. So that's what we got for relationships and how it affects your overall health. And we'll talk to you again next time.
have a healthy day.